So I wanted to take a few minutes to talk something about the conference and how we do what we do, and because, well, for me, it's what I do. And so one of the things, I've often been tagged with you're the business guy, you're the administrator, you've been doing this, for so long. And I was listening to Bishop Thomas talk about, when he rides on planes, and, it's that infectious twinkle in his eye and the smile that he gets. I rarely have the opportunity to talk to people on planes. They just don't talk to me. I've been told I have resting business face, and that somehow that impedes communication. I accept that. I'm working on open posture and leaning in and smiling. So if I awkwardly do that in the middle of a presentation, just work with me. I was in Indianapolis. We were at a board of administration meeting, and then it was going to be followed by a superintendent's meeting. And so I was going to end up staying over the weekend. So because I oversee the Arizona conference as well, I thought it was like too much to fly all the way home but I didn't want to spend a weekend in Indiana alone. And so I thought, well, what I'll do is at the end of day on Friday, I'll just hop on a plane. I'll go to Phoenix. I'll work with my churches there. I'll come back on Sunday, be ready for the next week, and we'll do that. So we had been there. We were, superintendenting, or actually board of administrating at headquarters, and we were talking about the church and the great reports and the global, how this family is amazing, what it does. You have to remember, we're 95% of our constituents are out there, all right, are around the world. 5% of Free Methodists are in the United States. Okay? Get busy. When Matt starts talking about sharing your faith and what we need to increase our ability to relate with people and share the love of Jesus, we're not kidding. Okay? This is the future of the world. So I got on a plane in Indianapolis, and I was headed over to Chicago on the way to Phoenix, because that's what planes do. And I was being very present and very open, and I sat down, and a young lady sat next to me, and her name was Sherry, and I learned a lot about Sherry. Now, Sherry, this is kind of not a fair, because it's not about me. It was more about Sherry than me, because Sherry was one of those people that was infectious, and you want to talk about everybody, and she wanted to talk very, very fast. She was an insurance executive. She had been invited back for some awards, and so she was there, and she was just trying to get home. And so I learned that she was a believer, that she goes to Mariners Church in Newport Beach, that she was in Rooted, and she and her boyfriend were doing it together. And then I learned that her boyfriend and her weren't living together, so once she found out I was a pastor, then, I get the disclaimer list, right? What do you do? I'm a superintendent. What's a superintendent? I said, it's sort of an executive minister, that look. It's like, I say, well, I'm kind of a pastor to pastors. I oversee an area, a geographical region. Oh, okay, like my district, yeah, like your district lead. All of that to say, on this particular flight, without reserve, without decorum, I learned things about Sherry that nobody should know. But of course, you come away from meetings of Matt saying, it's these opportunities that you have to love people and be present with her. Now, she was troubled in her spirit. And it was all the manner of things that, really, I can't say. I want to, but I can't. Don't tell yourself a story in your head. But it was about the intimate relationships between her and her boyfriend, and then her two previous boyfriends, and why they weren't good, and why this one she was really holding out because she thought he was going to pop the question soon. And how she was. But what ended up happening was she started talking about the things that she does is who she is. What I do is who I am. Now, we're all guilty of that a little bit. I think guilty maybe is too strong. It's how it's become, right? When we meet somebody, we say, well, what do you do? Well, you say, I am a pastor. I am an accountant. It's like, really? So our identity is now a function of our ability and what we do, our skills and competence. There's a disconnect. And it's just a practice I think we have to be aware of who we are, because identity is really, really important. It's as important individually as it is corporately. And so identity is part of who we are as the Free Methodist Church. I think is something I'd like to talk. And as we begin to understand that, we are a mission-driven organization. And I get really excited about this because we have a very clear mission, that we're going to love God, love people, and make disciples. Right? We are the Free Methodist Church. I think any good Christian, or even Christian by name, should be able to fit within this category, right? Clearly, Scripture is calling us to love the Lord with our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love one another, love our neighbor as ourselves, and then repeat the process. Wash, rinse, repeat. It's not that difficult. Right? We can do it every morning. We can think maybe that's the way we get to evangelism. Wash, rinse, repeat. We just think about that, and I'll let someone else come up with how that metaphor applies and can preach it well, John Hanson. But we're a mission-driven organization, and it's important. So when I was thinking about this, because I was thinking about how are we as a superintendent team, and we've been talking about how do we want to lead this conference over the course of the next 3 years. And one of the things we don't want to do is come every year with something, it's about saying, I was going to say something new and fresh. It's like, well, it's because in the beginning, God said, let there be light. Right? This whole thing starts with God's speaking. God spoke and it was. God spoke and it was creation. God spoke and it was order. God spoke and it was life. God spoke and there was rest. Follow? It begins when God is speaking, this voice of the Lord. And I was thinking about the voice that we need to have. And I was thinking about the identity of the Lord. You know, the Lord, when he speaks, he reveals himself. God reveals God's self and the things that God says. And so we learn about life and love and liberty and freedom and health and boundaries and communication and all those kinds of things that make up who we are. And it all begins with God spoke. And you look through that, just a simple story of the Old Testament and God speaking. We could say, and the angel of the Lord said, and the Spirit of the Lord appeared to them and said. He spoke through two individuals. He spoke through prophets. He spoke to power. Right? The Lord said to Moses, say to Pharaoh, this is what is true. It begins to shape what our voice is meant to be because we're a people who are meant to reflect the nature and character and name of God. We're a people that are a speaking people. Jesus spoke, and he said, I am the way, the truth, the life. We learn that Jesus reflects the Father in every way. We know that Jesus, when he spoke, when we look at the sayings and the names and everything else, that there was creation and there was life and there was healing and there was deliverance and there was truth in love. It's the voice of what's going on. And so, as I think about the mission of this church, we want to align ourselves with God. We want to take up the mission of loving people. We serve God, we minister to people, but that is engaging in the relationships that we need to have with them. And we make disciples. We simply align them into what God's truth is. And the question becomes, how do we accomplish this mission? How do we develop this voice? Well, there's a unique thing that happens with the Free Methodist Church. So the conference is responsible for many things, meaning the conference office or the office of the superintendent, because we are the conference, all right? We conference together. Men and women, young and old, right? Clergy and lay, we all come together to do that. But one of the unique functions of a conference is leadership development. We prepare people to answer the call of God into ministry service. Ministerial Education and Guidance and the Ministerial Appointments Committee are groups, along with the superintendents and just this fellowship, that see that process done. Leadership development is what we do. Ministry multiplication is what we produce. It's the outcome. Follow? So we're a mission-driven organization that has two functions. And I think it's what we want to be able to say to you is over the course of the next 3 years, we want to press into what does it mean to develop leaders? How are we going to do that specifically and concretely and not just have an idea of what's going on? And then if we expect that the things of God grow, which the Gospels teach us, then multiplied ministry will happen. The vision of the Free Methodist Church is that we'll bring wholeness to the world. through healthy biblical communities of holy people, multiplying disciples, leaders, groups, and churches. We know that when God is here, things grow, because that's the nature of God. It multiplies. It happens. So leadership development, ministry multiplication. How do we begin? How do we accomplish that mission is the question we're asking. And the first thing we have to do is engage the mission. All right? Still a little esoteric, a little thought, out there, but I want to talk about this. We begin with our identity. Okay? If we're going to engage our mission, we're going to start with who we are. And that's what's really important. So I want to just say three things in general. We're a gospel people. We are a gospel people. We are a people around the gospel of Jesus Christ. Who Jesus is moves everything and informs everything that we do and who we are. All right? And that's really important. Not a generic evangelical gospel that's out that we might refer to today, that's out there that you hear, the evangelical. We're a gospel people. We're a people that understand that God spoke. In Hebrews it says, long ago God spoke in many times and in many ways to our forefathers, to our ancestors. He spoke through the prophets. And today he has spoken through his Son, who's the very nature of God. Right? We're gospel people. We understand that this begins with God's first acting self-revelation in a God story with a God arc and a God plan, into which we find ourselves because we're part of God's created plan to be in relationship in that creation. And somewhere, somehow, in the rough middle of this plan, if we can call that, God's self incarnates, right? The big theological words, that God enters into the story that he's writing because we need that help. God needs to do something only God can do that we can never do for ourselves. And in the person of Jesus Christ, shows divine love in our very presence by taking everything that's wrong and bringing it into himself and holding it in tension and allowing the Father to work it out. We were just coming through Easter time, and I was thinking about the nature of what was, you do that. You think about what is the resurrection? What's happening at the cross as Jesus is crucified for the sin of the world? And I think, the miracle there, I was thinking that the miracle there is that even though he had all power, access to all power, he held this moment in tension for the work of God. The only one who had the right of retribution, the right of judgment, the right to fix this thing, the right to call down 10,000s of angels, held that moment in love. Right? Because love takes that hate and that stuff and it holds it and it doesn't pass it on. Instead, it delivers love. That's something that I'm learning how to do. It's something we have to do in a relationship with one another and with the culture. But that's what we do. We're a gospel people. We're the body of Christ. We're a priesthood of all believers. We believe that the Holy Spirit has come upon the church and that God is still speaking. God spoke long ago. He spoke in his Son, and the Spirit in the church speaks today through creation, through his word, and through his very presence to his children. We're the church, the hope of the world. And we're Free Methodist. We're a holiness people. We're a Wesleyan people. We have a distinctive. We believe in the equality of race, of gender, of class. We are advocates for what is right. And making things right is something that we must do because we're gospel people, not because we have an agenda. We were reading for my daughter, we homeschool our daughters, and one of the books they were doing was C.S. Lewis' Screwtape Letters. And in there, so if you're not familiar with it, it's a fascinating read, but the metaphor is that an elder demon is coaching a younger demon how to subvert the Christian. And one of the counsels was, Coming against Christians is hard because they rally in their spirit and it raises them up. They're kind of impervious to that direct attack usually. You want to be more subtle. Give them Christianity and social justice, and a platform to stand on, and something to engage. We don't engage those things, even though inherently they're right. We do them because it's gospel, because it's the heart of God, because it is the way of love through Jesus. It's the way to engage the fray and hold the tension in love. It's the hard work. We do this not because of we do this because Jesus. So to get this forward, to do leadership development, we're going to engage the mission. We're going to engage first with who we are, because out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, Jesus said. What's in here comes out. And if we don't form what's in here, then what comes out, you get what you pay for, I guess. We can't overlook that. Second thing we're going to understand in leadership development, that it's a formative process. It's not checking boxes. We've said this for years. This is not checking boxes. And so the people up here that we ordain, that we approve, that we invite into this process, we want to say, here's something to do and how we want to do it. And so this is how we grow. Discipleship, leadership, and reflection. It's a discernment process. I mentioned it earlier. A discerned no is just as valid and important as a discerned yes. Right? That's good work. That needs to be celebrated and applauded. So that's what we do. Who we are and how we grow. Discipleship is that walking alongside. Jesus called them. Follow me. Follow me and I will change how you see things and how you do things. I will make you fishers of men. Right? I'll give you a different perspective on how to walk this out. We'll put in relationship. So discipleship is this ongoing process of just sowing into others. Leadership. Leadership at every level is important. And leadership is a word that's often thrown around and misunderstood. But it's something that from time to time is required of all of us. That's not to be diminished. You're leaders in your homes, in your family. You're leaders with your friends. When you represent the heart of God, when you embody the truth, you're leaders. But then there's a category of people that are also leaders of groups and leaders of organizations and leaders of communities and leaders of culture and leaders of the world. And it's a different category. It's the same principle. It has to flow out of our identity, but it's about taking that position of going first, of walking forward, of walking in obedience, and having the courage in the formation to say, follow me as I follow Christ. And reflection, it's discernment. We can't rush through things. We have to ask and be reflective. Who are we? What's happening? What am I aware of? And we need to be in those things. So if we're going to be a mission-driven people, we're going to engage our mission. We're going to start with who we are, with our identity. We're going to grow intentionally and purposefully through discipleship, leadership, and reflection. And we're going to understand that as a result of that, we have values. That's going to become who we are, right? It follows our identity, and it's that expression. And the Free Methodist Church expresses it wonderfully. And for those of you who read the book of Discipline, pop quiz, what chapter does this come from? Right, 60-50, good. So how we live, I just thought I'd ask, one never knows. I'm always on a quest to find my people. Grace expressed through love, holiness expressed through transformation, effectiveness through discipleship. This is the values of who we are, right? Really, really simple salt of the earth. We are going to be a people, if we are a gospel people, if we are a priesthood people, if we are a holiness people, and we are a reflective, discipled people, we should embody grace expressed through love in our relationships. Holiness through transformation of life and heart and mind. And ministry effectiveness through engaged discipleship. That we're committed to repeating the process. We're going to do it over and over and over again at every level. That brings us to voice. I think if we get this flow started, if we shoulder into the flywheel and get it moving, the momentum it will build is our voice. We will begin to align ourselves with the kingdom of God and the kingdom principles in a way that now we will begin to reflect the heart of God and the presence of God and the will of God in every moment. In your home, in your workplace, when you shop, when you celebrate and when you have sorrows, when you're in pressure and conflict, and when you're organizing and planning, you will have the mind of Christ. That's the promise of the gospel. And we will be able to speak that. Because what we do is invite people to wholeness through relationship. We invite people to wholeness through relationship. Whether we're introducing someone to Jesus, growing them in the church in their faith and discipleship, processing them as members, building them as leaders, we invite people to wholeness through relationship. And I was going to suggest 3 simple things. Name it, engage it, align it. If we're a Christian people, if we're a holiness people, and we see the kingdom of God the way it is, what we want to be able to do is say, we're going to recognize that sometimes things are out of alignment with the kingdom. We're going to see that. So we're going to gather and rally in groups and make picket signs and go stomp around. I don't know if the joke fell flat or whether you think I might be serious. Help me, help you, help me. We wouldn't do that. We want to be a people then that would simply say, I'm going to name this. What I'm seeing is injustice. What I'm seeing is abuse. What I'm seeing is inequity. We want to be a people then, because we see with the mind of Christ, we are going to be able to identify what's happening. We have to name it so we can engage it with understanding. Because we want to know, why is this person here? My daughter had we'll be honest, it's the end of school year and she's taking finals, and she's not eager to take tests. And she had a crisis moment, sort of an existential moment of resistance. I'm speaking parental language with honor. About her feelings about needing to engage in test taking. And it was overwhelming for her. And as a rational, God-fearing, well-discipled parent, I wanted to overpower the moment. I really did. Like, oh, for crying out loud, really, we're going to do this. And so I began to, I honestly stopped in the moment and was like, what's happening? And I began to understand from her perspective how she was feeling afraid of what, if she didn't do well in the test, what might that say about her? And what would happen if those fears were confirmed? Mind you, she's 15, finishing her freshman year. Those are real questions. And I began to understand in that moment that she's here. We're not having a temper tantrum. What we're having is a crisis moment of heart. And I actually had to stop and I just kind of sat with her and said, are you feeling this way? Are you feeling that way? How would you? And it changed everything. And she took the tests and she aced them, right? And yeah, applaud for her, applaud for the moment, applaud that I got something right as a parent. But it's something as simple as that. What is this person's reality that they would be experiencing that whatever this is that seems so strange to me, antithetical to reality, is their reality, and that they would choose it and walk in it? I want to understand. I need to engage for understanding. How did they get there? Why did they stay there? What are the structures that allow them to be there? What's the messaging that goes along that would support that kind of thinking, right? Start applying those to systemic issues. right, of poverty and racism and gender, hostility, right? How do these things persist? If we don't understand it, then we're going to be a people that just try to yell over the top of the world. And as Bishop mentioned this morning, that's not going to help. We're just going to strain our voice. We might have a flash in the pan and get some notoriety or make a good point, but we're not going to bring transformational change. We want to engage it to understand it so we can deal with things holistically and be willing to long play in love than just symptomatically try to fix what's happening right in front of us. And once we do that, then we can reconcile. We're ministers of reconciliation, Paul says in Corinthians. So take up that ministry. We're going to align things. That means we're going to plot a redemptive path from where we are to where we're going. And I'm going to invite that person or people into a wholeness, into a preferred future, based in a kingdom values that are gospel grounded. Because that's what we do. And here's the thing. If we do this right and we get the momentum going, I believe that the Free Methodist Church is going to become that prophetic voice of God's love and holiness in our world. We're a prophetic voice of God's love and holiness in our world. All right, where you live, work, and shop world, right? And on the cultural stage and in the global stage world. Everywhere we go. Because we're found in the power of the Spirit standing on Christ. That's who we're going to be. Historically, that's our freedoms, right? We've looked at John Wesley, we looked at B.T. Roberts, the founders of our denomination and our polities, and we applaud what they did in the past. We applaud that they could see that there was a gross injustice in racism and that we were abolitionists early on and that they were advocating for women's equality and that speaking to power, even in the church, was an essential, that you had to have the voice at the table. I wish I could say that we fixed it and we're there and we're standing on a grander platform and launching forward. We have made progress. We have. That's a fact. And there's more work to do. And what's required is a prophetic voice today. A prophetic voice isn't just a loud voice. It isn't just a passionate voice, though it comes with that. It comes with conviction just grounded in gospel truth. This last Tuesday, I was with a group of people. It was an attorney firm who was talking about ministry trends and things happening in the church. And they didn't say it this way, but what they were saying is we don't have a gospel voice. They said with some of the new education reform that's being passed with sex education and things that are happening, the parental rights are just disintegrating around us. But, and they were saying it's that the world, in the absence of anything else, our culture and our legislatures and experts in their fields are saying this is the messaging. This is how we should understand 10 genders as something. This is how we should understand the interaction of people. It's like, why do they get to say that? Why do they have the last word? And the attorneys were saying, we don't have another voice at the table. And I was thinking, that's us. That's us. That has been our history. And it's great that we come from people that had that clarity and launched from that maturity and understood the willingness and the sacrifice it takes to move that forward. But if we stand and applaud what they did and say we're awesome because, shame on us. It's a new day. And what we want to press into, what we want to call ourselves to as a group, as a conference together, is that we would be a prophetic voice of God's love and holiness in the world. And so we want to walk down what that is. And the way we do that is this. We work through our ministers because that's what this body does. We qualify ministers for ministry. And that's in all kinds of creative ministry. That's in a church and a mission point. That's in the workplace. That's bivocational. That's everything we can conceive of because the gospel voice needs to go everywhere. And ministers get mission done through members. And let me just shout out here on a word for membership. Because sometimes we say, well, that doesn't work in my context or this or that other thing. This is all I want to say about it. Our call is to make disciples. That's what we do. We make disciples of Jesus. Disciples on mission, a disciple whose heart beats with ours, we invite to partner in membership. And this is why. Because a prophetic movement is a multiplication movement. It means it's going to keep multiplying in small bits. It's keep to grow far and wide. And we're going to have to entrust people with authority and responsibility. And we need to know that they're speaking our language and their heart beats with ours. That's it. We're going to make a disciple because that's what Jesus said. We're going to invite disciples who are on mission with us to be members so that together we can entrust them with authority and responsibility to keep us moving forward. Membership is important, but it's important because it's activated discipleship within our family. Okay? That's the way we do this. Let me give you 3 concrete things that we're really excited about this year. And if Chris Adams is standing around, I'll invite Chris to come forward. As we look at this leadership development process, and a few minutes ago we invited, we accepted conference ministerial candidates. And so they're now in a process of discerning how to go forward and a process of evaluation. And so we know that that's not a check the box, but what is it? How do we do that? Well, there's a couple of things people that we've decided to partner with that are of exceptional character and just friends of our family. One of them is this handsome man, Dr. Chris Adams. Hi, Chris. Chris works here at the university, Azusa Pacific, and he has something called the Center for Vocational Ministry, which he's about to tell us about, but it's one component of how we're going to help form ministers into gospel-centered, passionate people. Chris, would you tell us a little bit about that?
I would be glad to. Thank you. Good to be with you, Glenn, and great to be with you all and see a lot of good friends. And the phrase went through my head coming up here, I love me some free meth. Hashtag, but I don't know if that's okay to say, but I have come to deeply love and appreciate you all and this conference and the wonderful shared history with APU, but all the wonderful things God is doing through you and in local communities all throughout Southern California. So we want to come alongside you from the center in a couple of different key ways that I just want to mention quickly. The first is, being an academic institution, we have a research side to what we do, and we're deeply involved in a project called Flourishing in Ministry. You're all made to flourish, amen? In life and in ministry leadership. And so a couple of things with that. We will make available to you an online feedback tool. It takes about 20 minutes to complete. And for those of you that are in pastoral ministry in some form, it will give you personalized feedback about your own well-being in ministry and interactive help on some practices you can engage in to boost your well-being and sustainability over time. There's an accompanying phone app that allows you to track your well-being over time as you kind of craft your rhythm and practices to be able to do sustainable ministry. So we're excited about that. We are also doing a deep dive from a research perspective into the well-being of women in ministry, pastors of color, and bivocational pastors. And so we know at this point that there's a lot that we don't know about the unique joys and challenges that come for particular unique pathways in ministry leadership. So through Glenn, I will be in touch with some of you and ask you if you'd be willing to let me do an in-depth interview with you once a year for 3 years as we really come to understand more about how people are flourishing in particular kinds of journeys. So look forward to partnering with you in that. We're also very excited to announce a new partnership with a seminary. And we know that continuing education is a high value for all of you. And I don't know if you want to describe that. I can, because our Dean, Bobby Duke, explained it to me. So what we've been able to do is partner with the conference, who is funding the opportunity for you to take one of about 12 different seminary courses that are available to you. They just purchased a bunch of academic units, and so that, I'm sure, information will get to you. But if you do, I think it's around a B- or a B or better, then you can use those courses for academic credit at the seminary if you want to pursue a degree. So we're very excited about that piece. And it's really exciting to be able to offer that to you in partnership with the seminary. The last thing I want to mention, John, if we could go to the next slide, we're hoping to not only come alongside those of you who are in pastoral ministry and help you navigate the enormous complexity and the unique stresses that come with that so that you can engage in ministry for the long haul and flourish, we want to go upstream from that as well. And we've gotten a lot of grant funding for high school programming that helps us find those high school students that God is speaking to about a call to vocational ministry leadership. We know that at least 35% of the pastors in this room, God started speaking to you in junior high and high school. How many of you, by the way, just first felt that call to ministry as a student? Yeah, a bunch of you. And so we want to partner with you and help find those students in your congregations that God is speaking to them about that pathway. We have 4 opportunities for them. The first is an opportunity called Urban Underground, which will again occur this summer. It's an urban ministry plunge at the Dream Center downtown LA. Our faculty from undergrad in the seminary here go with them and talk to them about exegeting the city and theology of urban ministry, and they do very hands-on ministry work there. We have a worship arts lab. We partner with our School of Music where students can come and learn about theology of worship and worship planning, and if they're a guitar player, they sit with our guitar faculty member here at APU and so forth. Really for all of the arts, visual arts as well, and even audio and video engineering and video editing and those sorts of things are a part of that. We're starting to do Israel trips for high school students as well. And by the way, we will be planning an Israel trip for pastors in about a year, so I'll inform you about that as well. And then finally, new this summer, we're launching a social entrepreneurship lab for high school students. So this is for the students in your youth group who show up on Wednesday night with candy that they sell to other students, right? You all have the students, so there's entrepreneurial gifting there. And we want to give them a space to learn about a theology of work, a theology of entrepreneurship, and then those actual entrepreneurship skills, partnering with some of our business faculty and some other experts in that area. All 4 of those are available also for academic credit for high school juniors and seniors at a fraction of what it would cost them to once they're a student here. So they can apply that they can transfer that to any university, but they can also apply it to a degree here because we would love to have your students come to APU. That was a lot. Thank you for the time. I appreciate it. But yeah, God bless you.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. So one of the things I want you to understand is the way we're doing this is there's a value at the denominational level of partnering strong. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have experts around us. We have people around us. You are part of this network of people. And so to have people like Chris, they'll also, and he didn't mention directly, but as candidates go through the ordination track, they'll also sit with them for a in-depth psychological evaluation and interview, just to talk about emotional health, psychological health, because that's a part of what we do.
I actually have your profile to put up on the screen here.
Yeah.
No, just kidding. Just kidding. It's helpful.
And it's a great experience. Partnering is what we do and what we want to do with this university. So 2 things here. 1, so we have the Center for Vocational Ministry, and 2, we've made this arrangement with the seminary for that we can take up to 5 graduate level classes at half price. Now, the conference is also going to be pitching in and making that very financially accessible by paying a portion of that. And we have a great thing so that nobody, and this year, some of these classes are online, some of them are in Spanish and Korean and English, and some of them are right here on the campus or other centers around the Southern California. So what we want to do is know that formation and leadership development is an all-in sport, and we're doing everything we can to find the best partners and the best experts to shape our future leaders, right? Thank you, Chris. John Hanson.
All right, I just wanted to let you know at Centerpoint Church we are starting a school of ministry, and some of the people in your church that are called to ministry are ready to go to seminary right now, but some of them, that might be a little bit further down the road. And maybe it would be helpful to have an experience of a school of ministry that would help them to get their feet wet, to roll up their sleeves and dive in. And so the reason why we're starting a school of ministry at Centerpoint is because there's always a need. And it starts for me with Jesus. Matthew 9:35, it said Jesus traveled through all of the towns and villages, teaching in the synagogues and announcing the good news of the kingdom of God, healing every disease and illness. That's what Jesus was doing. He was going around doing all this ministry. And then it says he recognized in Matthew 9:36 that the people, these crowds, it said he had compassion on them because he recognized they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. And so Jesus is doing all this ministry, but he recognizes we still got a problem. Because we got tons of people that need to know what it's like to be shepherded, to be enfolded, to be a sheep that would belong to a flock, that would be somebody who could be drawn into the called out community, the church. And so Jesus said, so here's what I want you to do. He said to his disciples, you pray that the Lord of the harvest would raise up harvest workers that could be sent into that harvest. And he told us to pray for it. And we can all do it in so many ways in our own churches. But sometimes it's helpful to have a place or an experience where there can be a condensed shot in the arm of what it looks like. I know that for some of us, we have had a seminary experience. And it's also true that there are a lot of us for whom that's either a ways out there in the future or it might not even be the path we're on. For example, Centerpoint Church, we're in a highly blue-collar community. And there's not a lot of people thinking about, well, the next thing I'm going to do right now is go to seminary. But they want to get into some ministry, and we want to give an experience for that. So we've created a one-year school of ministry that's highly practical to raise up competent, spirit-filled ministers that can change the world and build the church of Jesus Christ and enter into that harvest field. And so that's what we're doing at Centerpoint. And it's not just a Centerpoint thing. We really are envisioning a future where we have people coming from all over the country, and we already do. We have 60 or so applicants in the process, and we're launching in September. And maybe there's some people in your church that may be right now 19 years old, 20 years old, going, what do I do next? And you might lose them to YWAM or to some Bible college up in Northern California or something. Why don't you send them to Centerpoint Church for 1 year? And then you can have them back, and they're going to be full of the power of the Spirit, ready to do the teaching in the ministry, ready to do the spiritual work of ministry, of sharing the gospel and of healing every disease and illness and following Jesus into that harvest field. And so we got a booklet on your chair. It's got all the details. You can find out more on the website. But it's an opportunity for all of us. We're creating something that I think will be a resource that will help raise up effective, powerful ministers. And you know what? They may go on after a year in this school of ministry to just come back and serve you in your ministry. Or they might get sent out into the mission field. Or they might minister for a while and then go to APU. But let there be an opportunity to take advantage of a resource. So share it with somebody in your church that might benefit from it. And we have a table set up downstairs, and Pastor Stuart Macklin from Centerpoint is there. You can answer any questions you might have about what this might look like. So thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, John. I'm just so thrilled that we're doing things, that we're seeing ministry bubble up from within. We're seeing excellent resources come from within. And we want to open the invitation to say, if you're doing those things within the context of your ministry family, let us know. We want to partner strong with one another. Centerpoint is an amazing resource. It's one of the benefits of having a large church. Churches are churches. They need to be preaching the gospel. They need to be making disciples. They need to be doing all the things they do. They can look like anything. Sometimes it comes together well. Centerpoint is a large church, but what Centerpoint does is leverage that for the benefit of the body of Christ. Kingdom, right? So we're bringing people and we're introducing them to us, and they may stay with. We may recruit some of the best new and young leaders through Centerpoint Ministries into our family. And if we don't, as long as they're being equipped and sent into the work field of the kingdom, we're happy. So thank you, John and team. Excellent work. We honor you and honor the work you're doing. Because we started in business, one of the things I was going to start with before I introduce my last guest is just speaking honor. In fact, we've been doing that all morning, but I don't want to overlook, the pastors here that are leading churches in various ways in various communities. Thank you. You are doing the hard work. And we know how hard you work, and we know the lonely days, and we know the frustrating meetings, and we know that sometimes you need that extra place. But we see you, and we love you. We pray for you, and we honor you, ministers and lay ministers and delegates that are here, giving your time and investing in your local churches and the lives around you. And I pray discipling others. Thank you for being the people that engage in the process and being a voice at the table, whatever table that is, and do that. And certainly not last but not least, I just want to say thank you to my wife. I can't see where she is, but Connie Prior is my wife and my love, and I honor her. Her partnership in life and in ministry is a joy to me and makes things sane, and I'm so deeply grateful for her life. So the last thing I wanted to do is introduce you one last partner, and this is important because I need everyone at a local church. It applies to you because ministerial process begins at the local church. It begins in the community where you all are, and it used to be that we saw it in someone else and we called it out, right? It's not just the calling of the Lord. That has to be there. But it's the affirmation of the community that says, you have the gifts and graces. It's the affirmation of the community that said, I'll follow you because I see Christ in you. And so you need to understand that this process of affirmation, as Rob comes up, that starts there. Come on up. And so one of the things we're going to do is we're partnering with Dr. Rob and Dr. Daniel and Wild Leaders, and he's going to tell you all about that, what they do. But this is now a centered part of our CMC process. So we generally look at about a 3-year process for a conference ministerial candidate. There's reasons it can be shorter and there's reasons it can be longer, but we look about that kind of a formative area because that's what we think is necessary. And so in part of that is, how do we walk them through the practical tools of hands leadership, right? What's that experience? How do we bring it, integrate it all together? And so this is going to become a requirement for ordination in the Southern California Conference. As I said in my email to many of the CMCs, these are not mandatory meetings, but it is a requirement for ordination. You can decide how you want to process your own thing. So Rob, it's a joy to be with you. Would you tell us a little bit about Wild Leaders?
Yes, thank you, brother. So first of all, it's hard for me to be around Superintendent Prior without my brain kind of exploding. That's one thing that's challenging, especially for a guy who loves paradox. We could geek out all day long. The second thing, there's a couple things I want you to know. First of all, is I have listening dumb face. So it's problematic in my marriage. So when I'm trying to listen, this is the look on my face. My wife says, what's that look on your face? And I'm like, it's focus, it's listening. So anyway, that's one thing. The second thing is that my new friend Adam just told me if this doesn't go well in the next couple of minutes, there's bubble wrap on the wall behind me. So he did mention that, yeah. This is the question I have, and very briefly, I just want to introduce you to a concept and give you some foundation for what it is that we're up to. My question is this. What is your wild story? What is your whole and intentional leader development story? And think about the use of the word wild. When we say something, that's wild, it's usually something that surprises us, something we don't have all the answers to yet, something that has some excitement and possibility. We don't usually say, that's wild, when it's something that's bad. But it is something that's surprising, and it has interconnected parts that we haven't discovered yet. And I want to tell you very briefly part of mine. And I heard, by the way, Bishop Thomas last night, he was describing the way that David described, that David didn't wait on the Lord, that David waited for the Lord. And that kind of blew my mind last night, because I realized that there's a possibility that I've been waiting for the Lord for 20 years for this moment. And I don't think it's just this moment, but this moment in my own journey. And some of you guys have known me for a long time. I mean, Doug Rank was my high school youth pastor. It works every time, because if you don't like me, blame Doug. Sorry. Just the way it goes. But I'm the son of a Free Methodist ordained minister. My dad. My parents, my mother, was like the catch in Spring Arbor. That's what my dad says anyway. My grandfather was the Spring Arbor pastor. So I have this long journey with the church. I taught at Azusa Pacific for 5 years, but I've never been invited back until the Free Methodist Church invited me back for this time. And my last conversation here, I was over in the School of Business, and it was close to the last. And my mentor, who was 50 at the time, and I'm 50 right now, and he and two of my other friends, the dean was a close friend of mine, another chair of a program was a friend of mine, and after being here 5 years, pulled me into an office over there and told me that I wasn't doing my job, and told me that I needed to be here every day of the week. And I was already starting to working with leaders outside of here and working with people in the church and in business and so on. And so they told me that I need to show up in a suit every day. And I walked out of that office with these three very close friends of mine with their disappointment, that memory on their faces. And then the next day, Kim Guerra, who was my mentor, had a stroke in that building over there. And was wandering around in classrooms, and the next day after that, he was dead. He was gone. And so when I came back on campus 2 days ago, Kim is still I wrote about him, and it's just a powerful moment for me to be here and to realize that, I've been talking about this a lot, that my investment in the Free Methodist Church is a very long play. It's a long play. It started the moment that Bishop Thomas invited me onto a leadership commission in 2009 maybe, and us trying to figure out, how do we do this better? And I said, I'm going to build a tool with a weird name, and that launched. And some of you guys know that story, but and we've been through these processes, but this moment has been amazing for the last couple of days. And so the concept I want you to think about is, what is your wild story? And what is included in that? And this is the four things I want you to remember before we go to what's next. Is that 4 words: whole, intentional, leader, development. And the concept of whole is really interesting. Like when you think of something, a physical object that is whole, think of a physical object that is whole, what comes to mind? Anyone want to throw it out? Just yell it out. Okay, what else? Complete. A physical object. An egg. Apple. Most people, you guys, think of a circle or a spherical object. It's interesting to me. When our world is designed around linear movements from point A to point B, when we think about something that's whole, we think of spheres. And I think that's interesting, because it means that the journey of a whole person, our gospel story, is more like circles than it is lines. It's more like things it's things that come back around. It's things that there are people that you've met here at this conference 20 years from now. Your children and their children will talk to each other, and they'll say, our parents were at a conference together. And I think it's a stretch to think about whole, because we also know that we're made whole in Jesus Christ, but we look inside and brokenness is still there, and it's always there. We're in this weird space, before kingdom come, about this kind of working through this together. But the human story, the gospel story, is a whole story, and it includes beauty and brokenness. That's why I'm in this, and I'm so excited for that. The second word is intentional, and this is we pass this over all the time. Intentional, it includes the word intent, right? And it's this idea that we have agency. Psychologists describe it as agency. We have a role to play in God's plan, and that we could have intent around where we're going and what we're going to do next. And that seems, I think we take it for granted that we have a role to play. And we have decisions to make, and we have walls to build, and all that. So that whole, intentional, and then there's a leader part. So very quickly, I'd like to invite my friend Shaylee up here on stage. So we played a game about this, and I think Superintendent Prior already mentioned this, but there's a game we played as children. We knew what this was about. Shaylee, can you go ahead and back by the bubble wrap? So we played a game about this. What was the game called? Follow the leader. No one had to tell us what a leader was. When we played the game, no one had to define the rules, but certain things happened in that game. This is why, and I borrowed this from my brother, because my brother's one of my mentors, talk about a long play, and he once said to me, he said, Rob, leaders go first. Leaders go first. And so, Shaylee, would you go first for us? Here she goes. Right, yeah, all the way up there. So think about Shaylee for a moment. And by the way, she doesn't know most of you. She's not sure, she's never been to a Free Methodist annual conference. I also, as I'm talking about Shaylee, I want you to imagine this. Imagine that there are 100, 200, 300, 500 Shayleys in this room 3 years from now who don't know we exist yet. Isn't that an awesome thing to think about, that possibility? And now for a moment, I just want you to focus your attention on Shaylee, okay? If the definition of a leader is a leader goes first, and by the way, by its definition, that means leader is a neutral term. There are people going first. There are leaders going first around the world doing very naughty things. It's when we start to attach our own values to what this is like, to a Christ-centered sort of focus around this, that it becomes something different. So she steps out and she goes first. I get a little frustrated, you guys, when we call everybody leaders. Because what it does is it disqualifies 40 years of research around what it actually feels like to be Shaylee. And just think about this, what her experience is, because this is an incredible moment of just paying attention to what this is like. And if I asked you guys, you would name it. She's alone. When she succeeds or fail, everyone's going to watch. She's going to have to draw on people like she never has before. She's going to have to figure out, how often do I keep going that way, and how often do I check in with the people that are following? And I'm not putting her above them, I'm putting her out in front of them. How does she decide when she stops leading, when someone else leads? This is the dilemma, and I'm telling you guys, this is where the gospel story is not inconsistent with psychology. There has been some incredible research that's been done over the last 4 decades about what this is like for Shaylee and what she's going to have to do. This is going to be trial by fire the first time, whether it's ministry or business or whatever, medicine, you name it. The first time she has to fire somebody, or the 50th time she has to fire somebody. What's it going to be like to delegate? And how is her spirit going to run alongside what it means to be a leader structurally? Because the whole story of what's around her includes a very complex conversation, right? It includes her competence and her skills. It includes the call on her life. It includes the people that surround her. Because here's the other deal. We know this too. We have got to get her surrounded. And the other thing about this is a lonely, isolating space to be in. It's hard to know who can be your friend now. And her whole network cannot be Free Methodist. She's not, so it's not a problem. But do you know what I'm saying? We have to be thinking about these things. So that what I spent someone asked me in India this last year, they said, how long is it taking you to build the Wild Toolkit? Which is a process to scaffold this moment for Shaylee. To scaffold this moment for her. That includes all those conversations, but also includes how does she invest in the development of the short list of people around her? That leadership development isn't just about developing a leader, it's developing her capacity to invest in everybody else. And I do this, you guys, because you still okay? Okay. Because this is what it's like. And I hope some of you in this room are going, I am there right now, Rob. And I need to get this scaffolded quickly because I'm in the middle of these trial by fire moments and I feel isolated. So thank you, Shaylee, for being our leader. So the last thing, thank you. So the last thing is this, development. Development when we ask leaders to develop, development by its very nature is change. It means when we ask leaders to develop, when we ask ourselves to develop, or someone asks us, we're asking them to be willing to change. And change for leaders, because they're humans, is hard. And so I made up a word for this that I call editability. Editability, and I define it this way. Editability is the willingness to have the backspace key hit on things that even feel like they're a part of your character. And I'm really interested in leaders that are willing to edit. It's hard to work with people who are not in a developmental moment where they're willing to change. And I get that there's times when we can't. And that editing process is going to be about questions, you guys. That's the thing, is most of development, I think, is occurring in questions and not answers. And so when we built tools for this, we built spaces where there is prescription, there's answers, there's metrics and ways to look at that. But it's also wide open space to bring a narrative alongside of that. You might think I'm extroverted. I'm pretty darn introverted if you get to know me a little bit. There's a story around when I become more extroverted. So let's talk about that and the impact that has on the team of people that surrounds me right now. So that development process is going to be a big part of this. And that the way we ask questions and we open up possibility for people opens up agency into their own faith journey. And so I'm super excited, you guys, to be partnering with you. The superintendents have been tremendous in just working with them and what's happening here. And it is a paradigm shift. It's not new. I'm not saying it's not the newest rocket science. It's just listening to the story of the gospel. And I just went out and said, what do we know about leader development? Let's see if we could build a process and a structure around that for the people across the church. So we're really, really excited about that. And can I just finish with prayer before I turn this back over to the boss? My boss in this. Dear Jesus, I am so grateful for this moment. I'm grateful for the long play. And I've been able to stand side by side with Free Methodist pastors for a few decades now. And I'm just so grateful for the moment we have and for everything that we've experienced this morning about seeing this integrative approach to our faith journeys in our life. And it all focuses on you, Jesus. And I look forward to getting to know people in this room. And if there are people in this room right now who even in picturing what Shaylee was experiencing just walking to the front of the stage, I pray that they would be surrounded quickly, that we would see them in the moments that follow as we walk out to lunch, and that we would see something miraculous happen within the Southern California Conference of the Free Methodist Church. Thank you, Jesus. And thanks you guys.
Thank you, Rob. All right, here are the last couple of things. Really excited, very, very excited to work with Wild Leaders. Superintendent team had an opportunity to go through all of the assessments and go to the facilitator trainings just so we could try it on. And the best part was it wasn't a magic bullet. It was formation. But it provides 10 separate assessments, provide the structure and the means for a conversation that will allow God to do a transforming work and put people in the lane for leadership that they need to be. It's going to be amazing. And this is that time. So every conference ministerial candidate will now be going through this. It begins in the second week of June, and we do assessment every single month. And we have a couple of times a year where we regather together. And it is, I can't wait. I can't wait for next year to celebrate what's happening. But some of you may be saying, hey, that sounds like a leadership process that we might want to just jump in on, okay? This is one of those things where the conference has made a large investment on behalf of what we believe is our future. And so we have also negotiated with them a discounted rate for buy-in. So if you would like to know more about how this may or may not be something that you could use at your church right now, even if you're not a conference ministerial candidate, things like that, Daniel and Rob and Shaylee will be down in Win 6. That's the building right across there on the bottom floor. Win 6 at, basically, they're going to be there at 1 o'clock. All right? So we're going to dismiss to lunch in just a few minutes. You'll have some time to go around, but you should be able to either go out and grab it and then come back and see them. They'll be there until we come back here at 2 o'clock. So know that. But in Win 6, if you want to do that, and you can buy in for a very low price for what they're doing, and just check it out. Go meet them and talk to them. It's worthwhile. Okay. There's a lot of information, but I hope the takeaway is this. We're going to develop leaders, and we expect ministry to multiply at every level. And we're going to work as boards and committees around this conference on staying on mission, loving God, loving people, and multiplying disciples in every way we can. And we want to know what's working and what's not working, and what creative new things that we need to add to the repertoire. We're going to be a mission-driven people that has a value basis of grace expressed through love and transformation, holiness through transformation, right, and effectiveness through discipleship. Because we are a prophetic voice. We're a prophetic voice of God's love and holiness in our world. And it's a voice that has been silenced. It's a voice that has been absent. And it's a voice that is going to shape the future of our state, of our nation, of our world, of our church, of the lives of the people around us. I believe that. So we're excited to be with you. Welcome to the next 3 years as we begin to unpack what it means to be a prophetic voice. And I hope that inspires you as well.